Good morning, Abundant Life Church. This is Pastor Chris. Today we're going to be in Romans chapter 9, verses 6 through 13. We're going to talk about questions that get your attention. Sometimes you're not paying close attention, and then other times somebody will ask something that all of a sudden snaps you to it and says, I need to focus. I remember years ago, my wife and I were just sitting on the couch watching TV. The phone rang. It was our oldest son, who at the time was in college. This was his question. And if you get a question like this as a dad, this one will get your attention. He said, Hey, Dad, you remember when I first started college, you said if I got a tattoo that you wouldn't pay my tuition anymore? He had my attention. He didn't get a tattoo. He's got lots of tattoos now. He was wanting to get a nose ring. In fact, he said, you didn't say anything about a nose ring. I had the classic dad answer to that. I said, talk to your mother. Yeah. In the last passage, Paul pretty much said that a Jew who refuses to come to Christ, even if they are the chosen people, the people of the covenant, if they refuse to come to Christ, now they're outside the covenant. Now, in that culture at that time, especially if you were a Jew, a statement like that is going to get your attention. What are you saying, Paul? How can it be that somebody who's one of God's chosen people is outside the covenant? It doesn't work like that. But Paul is saying that. Our obvious question is, hadn't God promised that Abraham will be the father of God's chosen people? And who were the people that fulfilled that promise? It was the Jews. So how could God now have a covenant where even a single one of the chosen people wound up on the outside? Wouldn't this mean that God didn't keep his promises? How do you answer that? It seems like for the new covenant to work, you have to throw aside the promises of the old covenant. The Jewish faith was built on the promise God had made to Abraham. Abraham, you're going to have a son, and that son would eventually be the patriarch of a great nation. Who was that great nation? The Jews, God's chosen people. So God's promise can't be fulfilled without the Jewish people. It just wouldn't make any sense. But Paul was saying that not only weren't the Jews, I'm sorry, Paul was saying that not only were the Jews who didn't accept Jesus outside the covenant, but that God's promise was still kept, even with some of those people outside the covenant. How? And if you're a Jew, aren't you starting to feel a little cheated and resentful? You're supposed to be in, and now you're hearing that maybe you're not. If you buy a ticket on an airline, you might find out that doesn't necessarily guarantee you a seat. You see, airlines overbook their flights. In any other industry, selling more product than you actually have is called a felony, but not for the airlines. Just because you buy a ticket and you're promised one thing and you paid money for it doesn't mean that you're going to get a seat on that plane. Okay? But what if the airline said, oh, actually, we kept our word, but you're still not on the flight? Paul is saying that God kept his word, but there are some Jews who aren't on the flight. How? How is that possible? Well, if my phone will stop acting up and allow me to actually access the passage, there it is. Let me read the first verse here. It is not as though God's word had failed. He's saying essentially God kept his promise. Okay. So you're saying all the Jews are in? No, but God's word didn't fail. Well, maybe he meant that God changed the covenant. He had the agreement with Abraham, but he changed the covenant. And in the words of Darth Vader, yes, I changed our agreement. Pray I don't change it further. But Paul assures his readers that's not what's going on. Paul was saying that the original agreement with Abraham was still in place. And it was the way that God had intended it all along. Look at the second half of verse 6. For not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Let me read the whole thing. It's not as though God's word had failed. God has kept his promise. Because not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Yeah, they are. Paul's saying, no, they're not. How could this be? Well, to find out, tune in next time. Till then, have a great day.